All right, real quick here. I know everybody's probably itching to take off. Ron Kelbley's our media guy. He's got all these maps and stuff he's made for us. Ron has a really good presentation he does. He's usually pretty quick with things. So I'm going to turn things over to Ron here real quick, and maybe we've got some time we can do some questions there if anybody has any for Kevin or Sam. Yeah, real quick, go ahead.
These meetings are great. We're and it is all we can do to make phone calls. I've been going door to door. I have gone to 2 different libraries and spent over $50 making maps, copies of maps. I am so scared of losing my home. My beautiful little 2-acre home with a pond. Phone calls aren't going to do it. Has anybody got any suggestions at all?
Well, I think you're looking at it right here. We're all doing the same thing. I mean, I've got about 5 acres. I'm concerned about it. Right now, the door-to-door is what we're asking. The calls and the letters down to Columbus. We're hoping that, with the way things are going to go with the setback bills and stuff, that we'll have the opportunity to be heard, and maybe we'll be able to get that amendment where we can get that vote. And that's where what we're doing here tonight is going to help. So, I understand everybody's got these concerns, but, if it's just one person doing this, we wouldn't be able to get anything done. So, this is a lot of people in here working for the same thing because we're all interested in one thing. That's our property, it's our home, it's our investment. So we have to protect it. So, yeah, Jim, real quick.
It was mentioned that we would have an opportunity to physically be at one of the opposition meetings. I think it was at the Ohio Power City. Is that,
Yeah.
did I hear that right? So are we planning a trip to Columbus?
No, haven't been following things here lately, but I haven't heard anything about any opposition. Yeah, there's no dates right now, so I mean, we'll get something out. If you sign up for our newsletters or whatever, we'll get information out as things go on. But yeah, we can all hoard into a bus if we got to and go down there and protest. If that's what it takes, let's do it. Because like the lady said over there, she's got 2 acres and she's interested in protecting what she has. So in my opinion, if that's what it takes, and we'll load up all the signs and we'll get this thing done. So here, let's turn it over to Ron real quick.
Hi, my name is Bob Bordner. I'm from Fremont, Ohio. How many people here are going to be down in Columbus on the 7th of June or 6th of June? I'm going to tell you right now, I've been there 3 times, and we stopped the Con bill in the committee. And whatever they tell you, don't believe them. Because the last time we were there, they come out and said they're going to go to an executive session, and they wouldn't be voting today. A lot of people left, and guess what? We are one of the 28 states that want to open up the federal constitution. Well, I would suggest get down to Columbus. The last time we were there, they couldn't even get us in a committee room, so they had to put us in the chambers. There was enough people there that could stop it, but you can't trust these politicians. You've got to be down there.
All right. My name is Ron Kelbley. Some of you may have seen some of the presentations I've done in the past. If you have, this is not going to be one of those. If you're interested in one of those where I've gone into some detail, I can supply them to you. Basically, it was my idea to come up with the title for tonight's talk. This is fantastic. We had these 2 guys here because the great part is the TV cameras left, and now I won't be on TV. So that's what my #1 goal. All right. I like to say, if this was Johnny Carson, the 2 main headliners went, and I'm the comedian at the end to finish things up. So we'll go quick here. Why here, why now, and what's next? Why are we doing these things? The personal reason I'm doing this thing is expanding rapidly behind the scenes. It's way beyond what you'll see I'm showing. I'm hearing people from the other side of Sandusky County who know of wind people who have been contacting them. So this isn't just an area of Republic wind and Seneca wind. This is Northwest Ohio. Why are we here? I know Kevin showed you some of these maps. These don't show up very well. But this is a map that we've come across. They consider this the Ohio Wind Corridor. If you zoom in on it, you see that it is mainly northwestern Ohio. And if we go in one more time, we actually superimposed some of the projects that we've already talked about. This doesn't even include Seneca Wind, which is going to be over here. More than half of the county, Seneca County, is going to have wind turbines if these things get approved. The average wind speed at 80 meters, that's what they're interested in, is the higher wind speeds. As they've talked about, they need taller turbines because they can't get enough wind at 400 feet. They got to go up to 600 feet to install for us. Again, same kind of thing, zoomed in. Just wanted to show you, it's hard to see the colors here, but this is a darker yellow area, which is a little bit higher wind. And what I'm saying is look out Seneca County or Sandusky County. There's a big section up here that's probably going to be the next area. They're probably already developing from what I've heard. Unofficial news flash, public debut. What are the 6 projects that we're talking about tonight? Here's 4 of them that we found out from Apex. Now, I've called these my own. Republic Wind has already been applied for. The way they've discussed the Emerson Creek project and the way the Huron County commissioners have talked about it, they talk about phase 1 and then phase 2. There's also a project called Emerson West, which is down here to the bottom. Now, this is the 5th project. This is the Seneca Wind that everybody has also heard about. They've also applied to the Power Siting Board. And I actually highlighted on this map just to give you a feel what some of the areas are. This is Attica, this is Bloomville, Melmore, because their maps are so horrible you can't tell what the communities are, basically. Also, just to let you know, each turbine is actually located at the center point. And because they went out and drilled a bunch of test holes, that's why they've got some turbines located fairly close together. It looks like they're on top of each other. They're really not. They're just test holes beside each other. They're going to have to pick one or the other. They've got to give them some spacing. Now, this is the 6th project we found out about. They're basically bringing this project back from the dead. The company that had originally started organizing this gave up on it a couple years ago. And what we found out was this is the southern half of Seneca County and the northern half of Crawford County. Now, if you look at the blue in here, it kind of matches up to the areas that were part of the Seneca project. So they're really close together. They're butting them right up against each other. Now, I'm a numbers guy. So what I did was I said, all right, if I sit down and I make some assumptions and things, what are we really looking at here? We know Republic Wind's 200 megawatts, 53 turbines, well, actually 58 turbines, 57 to 58. We know that for sure. We know Seneca Wind's, they're saying 70. I made some assumptions. If you go out on the Apex website, they tell you the Emerson Wind West project is 200 megawatts. If you're from the Huron and Erie County areas, the Emerson Wind 1 and 2 is 500 megawatts. If you roll all that up, we're looking at Seneca County right now without any additional projects, which they could very well be moving to the west, is already at 213. So this is what we're proposing to be probably the new Seneca County seal. Unfortunately, they're not to scale. They're way too short. They wouldn't even show up on the turbines if it was actually to scale. Again, just real quick to go through the projects. Republic Wind has already been applied for, and I'll show you where they're at in the process. Seneca Wind started the application. Emerson Creek, I call it 1 because a lot of these projects they call 1 and 2 for phase 1 and phase 2. I'm sure if there's some Apex, I know there's some Apex folks out here. You can clarify that if you want. But the Huron County Commissioner already admitted that they've already given approval to that. Honey Creek is the new one we came across that they brought back from the dead. And I think the way Emerson West sits between all the other projects, they're kind of waiting to see what all flushes out before they decide whether they're going to pursue that one or not. So what's next? Sam actually brought it up. This is a picture of the Ohio Power Board Siting Board, their website. This is what it looks like when you log in. If you go down here, you'll actually see in this red box down here, there's pre-application phase, pending cases. If you go in and look under the approved cases, that's where the Greenwich case is at. Republic Wind is now under pending, and Seneca Wind is under pre-application. Now, if you go down and look under operational, those are actually installations or projects that have been applied and actually installed and are operational. Now, if you go in one more layer deep under pending, you'll see this is the actual Republic Wind, and that's what Sam talked about, the docket number. They started in 2017. Interestingly, Sam mentioned they started the process just before the holidays. Isn't it amazing? They started the Republic Wind project just before the holidays. I don't believe these companies are that creative. I believe they all utilize the same process. Doesn't matter what state, it doesn't matter where they're at, they all do the same thing. The reason I bring that up is I walk around, I love these hand-free microphones. We have these books available up here for you to buy. We're actually in contact with the author, Greg Hubner from South Dakota. This thing reads, take out the word South Dakota, insert the word Ohio, Michigan, whatever. It's the same process. It's amazing. You want to educate yourself on how all this stuff actually works? These are great books to get. Okay, there's my advertisement for the day. Now, if you go in one more layer, these are actually the cases or the documents that they talk about. And this is what we watch fairly closely. They actually posted another series of documents, I believe it was either yesterday or today, updating our case. And I'll show you what you have. If you go out, every project has the same process flowchart that it goes through the Ohio Power Siting Board. If any of you have been to what we call the meeting, usually what happens with a project is those people who are in the area, we call it in the box, and that's the box that surrounds the project, get a letter that says, hey, we're going to have a meeting in a couple of weeks. It just so happens for Republic Wind, they had the wrong date. Then they sent out this little 3x5 index card. My neighbors never got one. They wanted to go to the meeting. Gee, I wonder how that happened. Oh well, that's just a story of my own. But where we're at right now is this is actually where they go ahead, send the letter out, and they have what they call the informational meeting. Those of you who went to the Seneca Wind meeting, you were severely disappointed, I could tell. Where we're at right now is we have gone all the way through for Republic Wind. There are postings out there that says they have submitted everything that's necessary. Now the Ohio Power Siting Board is going to review it, and they also sent them a bill for $100,000. So that's going to be the next step for Apex is, are they going to pay the $100,000 bill? Now, when you talk about going to the Ohio Power Siting Board, they set up a series of hearings, and they have not posted those hearing dates yet. And there will be one public hearing here and a separate public hearing here. Oh, I'm sorry. Those are the notices. Here's where the actual hearing will be. And if I remember, this is what the calendar looks like. And you can see these are hearings that are scheduled. So you can actually track when the progress changes. Okay, a little bit of background. Not everybody in here has been attending the meetings, so you may not necessarily know the terminology, so I'll try to share that with you real quick. A participant is somebody who wants a turbine installed on their property. They're going to pay them probably $10,000 to $20,000 a year, depends how good of a negotiator they are. Now, just talking about township trustees and conflict of interest, I've seen 3 or 4 different township trustee lists, and every one of them, I think there's 6 of them in the Republic Wind project, at least 4 of them have people who are going to get turbines on their property. Setback waiver. That's kind of a new thing. I gave it that term, but both Kevin and Sam talked about it. If they can't put the turbine in on your neighbor's property without moving it closer to your house or your property than what the setback requirement is, they get, they get it like they talked about, $1,000 to $2,000 a year. And then our good old friends of wind. The goal, from what I've been able to figure out, if you talk to the county commissioners, you always hear, well, there's a majority of people that supports the project. Well, somebody comes up, they give them the sales presentation, they came up to our house, they talked to us about it, offered us a contract that said, hey, be a friend of wind, we'll pay you $500 a year. Although if you looked at the contract, it actually, we were giving up an easement to them if they wanted to use our property to access their wind turbines. And we aren't even one of these two people. And that's the one thing, if there's anybody who's out there, the one way that I've talked to these other people from other states that you can stop these things, talk to the farmers before the projects get too fully developed and give them the real story, because they don't get the real story. They get the PR from the wind companies. Okay, so here's some questions I've gotten from people because they know I've been gotten involved with this project. Do those who live near the industrial turbines receive any kind of payment? Like, do you get free electricity? Everybody thought we got free electricity. No, what we do is we get the ability to look at these 600-foot turbines, 1,225 feet from our home foundation, and all the negative effects. What are the negative effects? That's what my other presentations were about. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. You've got shadow flicker, you've got turbine noise, you've got infrasound, which is a major issue, you've got ice throws, you've got pressure changes. My one neighbor actually went and visited a turbine up in Wisconsin that was 600 feet tall. And he came over and he said, you know, when I got out of the car, I could feel it in my chest. There's the pressure changes. So let's review a few of them. This is actually out of the application. They said there were 828 receptors. They've updated it a little bit. Well, a receptor is our homes, by the way. And they go through all the different people who are affected and how many hours. Well, there was actually, I did it again, 5% of all the people are going to get at least more than 30 hours. And some, if you read the new documents, are going to get shadow flicker, which is like if somebody would turn the light off and then turn it back on and then turn the light off and turn it back on, coming in your window up to 200 days a year. There are so many YouTube shadow flickers videos out there, I couldn't decide which one to copy. So all you gotta do is go out to YouTube and type shadow flicker. You'll see them from every state that's out there. They claim they're no louder than your refrigerator, or it's like having an appliance sitting beside you 24 hours a day. Well, there are people who have said, you know, it's like an airplane that flies around and just never lands. They've submitted sound studies to meet the state requirements. The results indicated that the sound today in our area has an average of 40 decibels, and they claim that we're only going to experience an average of 45 decibels. Now, again, remember, I'm a numbers guy. Here on the GE actual map, and it kind of matches up, it matches up to the distance we're talking about, which is somewhere in here. It's around 45 decibels. I want you to look at something because I've started to investigate. My background is I used to be an engineer. I'm sorry. The details behind how these things work and the sound comes off. The sound is mainly generated when that arm comes down. When you look at the videos, it always seems like the sound comes when you're going across the main base, but that's the speed of sound. If you watch it really closely, it's that downstroke. And if you look at this diagram, they're showing you the sound coming off the downstroke. Well, here's my issue with averages. You know what that is? That's my wife's vehicle. My 2015 Equinox says she drives an average of 37.2 miles an hour. Any of you know my vehicle, my wife? 37.2 is probably what she's doing at a stoplight. I mean, so that's the whole thing based on their premise. My wife must average 45 miles an hour. Are there times she goes 70? Absolutely, maybe even more. So that's the problem. That's the fallacy of using averages. Average is not a good number to use. Now you're talking about average across 900 homes. Here's the bigger issue in my mind, and this is one of the handouts we have, and if you didn't get one, please get one. This is probably the single biggest issue that has recently come up in a number of years in infrasound. We have a handout showing a variety of studies that are out there that have impacted it. The thing is, it's not going to affect everyone. I'll tell you that right now. It's an inner ear problem. We've got some doctors out here I've talked to about that already. But the thing is, if you go out on a boat, are there some people who get seasick and some people who don't? That's the same kind of issue. These are the health issues that people are going to run into. I'm not saying it's going to happen to everybody, but it's going to happen to a number of people. And the fact that they basically say it's all in your head, well, actually it is. It's all in your head. That's what causes the problem. Infrasound, you keep hearing about it. That's actually the thing that happened down at the Cuban embassy, where those people all got sick, it was infrasound. Now they're actually claiming there was something that happened over in China in their embassy. That was infrasound. Again, all you got to do is go out and look. Sure, there's a number of studies that the wind companies are going to show you. Most of them are either been paid by them, or as I think one of these two guys talked about, they're paid by the organizations, the American Wind Energy Association. They're like the mob boss. They're the ones that set up all the rules and everybody follows by them. And they're very successful at what they do. But I guess the question you got to ask is, wish you knew how to run this thing. Will wind developers guarantee there'll be no health issues from the turbines? How can they guarantee that when they already put it in their contracts? You may experience it. If there's so many things posted with audible and visual confirmation about the negative impacts of industrial wind turbines from all over the world out on the internet, are they basically saying all these people are exaggerating and lying? Impact on property values. There's a lot of studies out there on property values. There was a guy from Van Wert, yes, Van Wert, who actually went down to the State House not too long ago and testified that the property values in Van Wert actually went up after the wind turbines were installed. I kid you not. They probably did to a point, because what they do now is that contract that that farmer is being paid for that wind turbine is actually rolled into the value of the property. So if he's getting $10,000 to $20,000 a year over 10 years, guess what? It just increased his property value by $200,000. Everybody else, theirs went down. Theirs, the farmers, went up. It's a common sense thing. You know, will it impact property values? Again, same kind of thing. You go out and you look all over the place. New York, Wisconsin, all the people that have had experience with these things. Will the wind developers guarantee in writing it won't negatively impact it? Heck no, they're not going to do that. They already put it in their documents for the people who sign off on the contracts. Landowner leases. This is another terminology we talk about, absentee landowners. You can actually look on the map and see if there's no dot close to the farmland, that the turbine is located in. That's owned by an absentee landowner. I know of one friend who is an absentee landowner, and I actually have a cousin who's an proposed absentee landowner in the S-Power. He basically lives 5 miles away from the closest turbine. And I was like, well, how would he have a contract to put a turbine in on his property? And then I thought about it. Wait a minute. It's his mom and dad's old farm 10 miles down the road. That's the same thing that you see a lot of people do. Real quick, this is something, if you've seen any of my presentations, we've talked about the difference between if a company came in and the industrial turbines come in, and I'm not going to go through this, I'll just slide through it real quick. We've already talked about the setback stuff. Basically what they want to do is put it 1,225 feet, which is less than a quarter mile. Last time I did the math and stuff like that. Questionable business practices. It's kind of scary. It really is kind of scary. Is it transparent to target citizens with agricultural farmland with things like, well, all your neighbors are signed up, why aren't you? And in fact, they aren't. We've heard story after time where people have made that comment, actually went out and talked to their neighbors, and they said, we didn't sign up. Is it transparent to sign a bunch of leases before holding any public informational meeting? If this was such a good idea, on day one, they should have a big meeting in a downtown city, invite everybody in and say, hey, we want to put this in, come in and sign up, let's all talk about it. Is it credible to discredit legitimate concerns raised by citizens? And they do. Apex, there's articles about Apex out there viciously attacking people, claiming all kinds of things about them that aren't true. Is it credible for the wind companies can't produce a single relevant study proving 1,125 feet setbacks are safe? This is kind of a personal thing. We've been to a lot of meetings. We've seen with some of the commissioners and stuff, and we see the letters that actually are supplied to the Ohio Power Siting Board that the school boards sign off. They say, hey, this is a great thing. The commissioners say, hey, this is a great thing. Real quick story, I gotta share it. The commissioners, unfortunately, schedule like 4 meetings a year out of remote sites. And they scheduled one at Flat Rock. Is anybody at the Flat Rock meeting? There's a few. It was a classic. They probably have, what, 10 people attend their meetings? We had, what, almost 150 people in there? And about 148 of them were against the wind projects. And one of the issues that was brought up was by one of the commissioners, and I'm not gonna mention it to him. He said, well, hey, for the last 5 years, we've heard nothing but positive comments about this. And we're like, we heard about it 30 days ago for the first time, for goodness sakes. How could we complain about it? Isn't it the job of the local political officials to protect the health and welfare of the citizens they represent? These guys talked a lot about it. Why aren't the public meetings being held when the county commissioners were contacted with the details? Why is it we find out about it after an application's already rolling and underway? What about the school boards? They had to have meetings to talk about them too. Many of them have sent letters of approval in. Seneca East did that. Again, just raising some questions. Some final questions, setback distances, where's the studies? Why are states like Indiana, now we've had Michigan with Mike? Kevin, thank you. Kevin, Mike's one of those two. In here to tell us the real story, the rest of the story that they've dealt with. And it's the history. These other people have experienced it. They said, you know what? We've learned our lessons, we're gonna make some changes. Everything I've read, everything I've studied said it's gotta be at least a half a mile away. Once you get a half a mile away, most of the complaints go away. This is just a sample of some of the setback areas in some of the townships and counties in Michigan and Indiana. Heck, some of them aren't even accepting applications. Again, now we're getting back to the visual impact. 591 feet is equivalent to a 60-story building. The blades are going to be 445 feet across. That's 1.5 times a football field length. The FAA is going to require anything over 500 feet to have a dual flashing light. People are already complaining about having one flashing light, let alone two. And the challenge with all this was, how do you compare it to landmarks that are around here locally? One of them is, if you're from the Bellevue area, we've got the Central Soya storage tanks. Those are 250 feet in the air. Okay. Probably a lot of people haven't visited the Space Needle. It's about 600 feet tall. That's about equivalent to what one of these turbines goes for. It's hard to tell really in the background. You can tell it is a big structure. Washington Monument. Look at the size of the flags and the buildings down here and the size of this. This is actually 50 feet shorter than what the turbines are going to be. And it was, as was mentioned earlier, Davis-Besse Cooling Tower is 100 feet shorter than the proposed turbines. Now here's my favorite part. I had to pick a landmark that I knew the height of. How many of you have seen the big blue water tower on Route 4 and 269? Has anybody seen it? Okay, next time you drive by it, that's 150 feet tall. What would it look like if we built a 600-foot turbine out of the Norm water tower? That's what it would look like. You got 4 towers stacked up, you got the legs coming across, so next time you drive by there, keep that in mind. Do your research. The organization Kevin's with, he represented tonight the Information of Informed Citizen Coalition. I mean, there's tons and tons of things. We actually have a handout with a lot of organizations that are out there across the country. We're not alone. There's, again, I mentioned, there's handouts out there from all the groups that exist across the country. They've learned from all the issues and problems that are involved. It can't just be us. It's got to be something that's systemic to the installation of these things. Okay, why now? One slide real quick. Well, this isn't a quick slide. This, I wanted to kind of explain to you. I hate to admit, I used to dabble in the energy industry a little bit for my company that I worked for. And this all really started back in the mid-2000s. But what we have in the state of Ohio, and a lot of states have, are what's called a renewable portfolio standard. It's basically what they did was the states wanted to come up with something to address global warming, greenhouse gases, all those kinds of things, and created a mandate to help make electricity generated from renewables economically competitive. Well, you know what that means. If they've got to make them competitive, then they've either got to subsidize the hell out of them, or they got to make the other ones more expensive. And in our case, They've done both. Common theme behind all the RPSs, their goals to increase the use of reusable energy. What happened was it started out in 2008 as Senate Bill 221. They said it was intended to stabilize electricity rates at the time. I don't remember electricity rates going bonkers at the time. Again, I used to be involved with energy. Natural gas prices were crazy during that time, but not necessarily electricity. They broke it into two parts. There's a demand side. Basically what they said was the utilities were forced to reduce customer usage by a specific percentage every year. On the supply side, the retailers were to provide a certain amount of electricity from renewables. Anybody know about this? Again, one of those things that occurred down at the State House and nobody knew about it unless you were involved in the energy industry. What it said was by 2025, 12.5% of our electricity was supposed to be from renewables. And half of the renewables at that time were supposed to be by in-state facilities. Well, they've since changed that mandate. This is just kind of a bunch of detail that talks about it and what qualified as a renewable or whatever. And the one thing that was noted was in Ohio, I forgot to show you this. We already had Kevin here from Michigan. This is from the Michigan Journal of Environmental and Administrative Law. Another Michigan guy helping us out here. This is his evaluation of the Ohio RPS. Okay, what it required was a 22% reduction in the annual energy consumption by 2025. That means everybody, whether you're a business, whether you're a home individual, they were mandated to make that happen. And a 7 and 8% reduction in peak. Energy is kind of complex. I'm not going to talk about peak costs and things like that. The bottom line was they were out there to force you to use less electricity. After 2008, a wonderful thing happened. Eureka. We discovered natural gas in Ohio. It changed everything. 2014, they went back and decided, you know what, we're going to freeze this thing until we sit down and really evaluate it. It kind of goes through some more stuff and talks about why the prices went up for other folks. If you had a co-op, our price didn't go up near as much as what the other electric companies did. This was kind of humorous. The evidence analysis is important because states often set renewable targets, make sure you hit the right button, without knowing how much electricity can be generated from renewable sources. In fact, Troy Balderson stated that exactly happened in Ohio. The mandates were developed void of any evidence of scientific calculations. Kind of frightening. Okay. Let's see, this is one of the new slides in there. I got to read through it. Most renewable energy rely on intermittent fuel sources, require backup fossil fuels, typically natural gas. Wind power most likely would cause a thermal plant to switch from generation to standby, which means it's going to continue to burn fuel. So basically what we're doing is we're generating electricity that we don't need. This kind of goes through all the things of his discussion and analysis. One of the things, this is only like a year and a half old, the true cost of wind power could be 50% higher than previous estimates. One of the biggest shortcomings of wind generated electricity is intermittency. Intermittency means the wind's blowing, the wind's not, the wind's blowing, the wind's not. Who wants to have that supplying power to your house? I don't think I would. The variability requires additional reserve capacity. That basically means, you know what, for every wind turbine out there, and I've heard some folks who did some analysis that said for every 10 wind turbines that are out there, you need a peaking plant like we have over in Fremont. When you go around Route 20, that's actually an electrical peaking plant to be available for those. In other words, wind energy requires redundant generation capability from a source that's able to match the supply with the increase and decrease in demand. Redundancy is both expensive and inefficient. And here's some discussions that were already brought up. Wind power is often low in the morning, a time when demand is traditionally increasing, and wind end output and demand are anti-correlated. Wind is heavily concentrated at times during the year when demand is at a minimum and declines when demand is rising. What that means is during the summer when it's the hottest and we use the most amount of electricity, that's when the wind blows the least. In the wintertime, when we don't need as much, that's when it blows the most. And these are just kind of some summary points, why from a cost standpoint. If the new RPS, and they still are working on redoing the RPS, requires utility companies to still buy renewable energy, the closer the better in terms of how they set up setbacks so they can install more wind turbines. Also, it was already talked about the production tax credit. Just to give you some numbers, I'm a numbers guy, there's a study actually out by Cleveland State that basically said average electricity cost is 10 to 11 cents a kilowatt. About half of that is generation, about half of it is transmission. So take 10 cents, 5 cents to make electricity. Wind turbines are getting 2.3 cents. Everybody keeps talking about per megawatt stuff. I kind of deal with it. What do I live with when I look at my bill? So they're basically getting subsidized for their capital costs is what's happening. And that's what makes them attractive. Okay, this is something I came across. This is only 212 slides. To save you some time, I'm only going to do 211. So, no. I try to pick the highlights because basically I wanted to explain how the electric system works and why having wind turbines is basically useless capacity. And his question here was, our energy policy, is it from science or from lobbyists? Does wind energy provide large amounts of electricity? It could, but the problem is because of the wild fluctuations, only produces about 30% of the time. Does wind provide reliable and predictable energy? No. Even if their best efforts, they still need to have backup support. Here's a graph that shows the variability of wind out of an actual site. A little button won't work. Down here. Do you want that supplying your house or your business? Up and down, up and down? I don't think so. How much will you get? Here's an example. This shows a graph of a turbine going up and down and up and down. The average is only 13%. Yeah, during these peaks, it was creating 40, 50, 60%. It kind of all goes back to that average thing again. This is just some more data to show that demand can't be matched by turbines because turbines are up and down. Like this example in these 2 days, it didn't even blow. The wind didn't blow. Does wind provide dispatchable electricity, meaning when you need it, you go to flip that light switch on, is it going to be there? No. Now this is where we get into the detail. Does wind energy dependability provide one or more of the grid demands? Grid demand is the load. That's the requirement that we all have. It's basically broken into 3 pieces. Now we'll go back and point out one thing. Primary job of grid operators is to supply exactly the demand meets need on a second-by-second basis. There's 3 things. There's base load, following load, and peak load. There'll be a quiz afterwards, so that'll be on the quiz. What is base load? Base load is something that's constantly out there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your refrigerator, your TV sets, your lights, the different things in your house you depend on a regular basis. Can wind energy supply a base load? No, it's up and down. This is just some more discussion about it. They talk about how there's no way that wind energy will ever replace base load. That's usually nuclear power, it's usually coal, or recently they're adding more and more natural gas. The second part, and you can see this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is a time duration during the day. The second part is called load following. What does that represent? That basically means when you come home at night, and that's why if you're on a co-op like I am, we've got on peak hour rates that are higher because now all of a sudden they got to add more capacity onto the system. That way when you do come home and you turn on your lights, it will be there. And then the third piece is what's called peak demand. Those are the surges. Those are the times when we come home, it's hot out, you turn on your air conditioner, it's ready to run to cool your house down. It's not going to happen every day, but you know what? The electric company's got to be ready for this. Can wind energy supply peak load? No. And this is just some more description about it. And the problem is when wind energy is produced, they have to have other smaller facilities ready to run at the same rate and burn fuel and be ready to go due to the inconsistency of wind. Somebody tell me, what did wind energy do for us? Here it shows a demand curve versus capacity. Oh, this was a question. What if they put a lot of them in? I mean, thousands. Can they still meet the demand? Well, there's actually an area over in Australia. Australia's got a lot of experience with this, and it's interesting. If you look at Australia, they've put a lot of restrictions on this since they've rolled it out in different areas. It's the most geographically dispersed collection of wind projects in a single grid. Here is the results they had. Despite enormous diversity, wind energy is still wildly variable. What are you going to do during these times? Somebody still has to produce that electricity. And then there's a factor on capacity value. It really has no capacity value. That's basically, is it available when you need it? No, it's not. This was a really good slide. Is 1 megawatt of power equal to 1 megawatt of power? Once again, we got the old averages going for us. The one going up and down, that's wind. The one that's a straight line, that's provided by other types of energy that's out there. And then there's a whole series of things he had on there. I mean, very fascinating study. This guy has been involved in energy for a number of years. Again, I'm not making this stuff up. There's a lot of evaluations out there I found out recently that are all saying the same thing. So, okay. There was one lady I talked to over here, and I don't know where she's at. She's located close in proximity to outside the box, as we like to say, even though she's probably closer to a wind turbine than people who are in the box, because people who are outside the box didn't get the letter, even though some of them are actually closer. And she came up and she started tearing up. She said, are these things really going to happen? Is there anything we can do? I was going to look for Representative Reinecke and say, you need to talk to Mr. Reinecke and let him understand this is a major issue to a lot of people. One last thing. I've dedicated a ton of time into this project. You ask my wife, she mows the yard, she does all the things that I wanted to get rid of years ago but was unable to do. She's picked up on the tasks and taken them over for me. And I was going to stop because it was taking so much time to learn. And we made a presentation somewhere, and afterwards there were a couple of older ladies who came up to me and said, can you point out to me on this map where my house is at and where these turbines are? This is the first we heard about this. I can't stop. I got to keep helping people. That is my goal, to let Sandusky County know, and Huron County know, and Erie County know, this is coming your way. It's happening right now. I'm hearing the stories. They're already soliciting power, or farmers and people who are to see if they'll sign up for the contracts. So. Okay, that's enough for me speaking. Try to talk as fast as I can. Sorry about it if it was confusing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. All right, just some real quick things. At our tables over here, have some petitions for the alternative energy zone. If anybody hasn't signed it, we'd like to get some signatures on that. We plan on presenting that to our county commissioners here in Seneca County, try to make a statement and get that thing pulled. That is the welcome mat for this stuff. Unfortunately, it won't stop the projects that we got right now on the pipeline, but any proposals it could stop. We did receive reports that there's been wind energy contractors out on people's properties. If you see anybody on your property you do not know, I would suggest you contact the sheriff's department. These people were a contract survey company, and they were out looking around. So they might give you every excuse in the world why they're there, but the fact is they're trespassing, so get them off there. Real quick, if you know anybody that's talking about leases or wants to sign a lease or has been approached, I suggest you talk to them, have them call one of us. We have information on our Facebook page. We got pamphlets at the doors. You guys, it's got our contact information on it. Whatever you sign is going to be with your property for a long, long time. And in the back, Chris Bauer, he's helping with the Huron County along with the folks from Greenwich. He's got signs back there for Huron County, and he'll be willing to help you out so we can work over there. And one last thing, if anybody is interested in the intervention process through the state with Republic Wind or Seneca Wind, come up and see me and I can give you some information you may find helpful. Anyway, I appreciate everything everybody's done, especially folks with the group that's helped out, and thank you for coming. Have a good night.